This session is The Pandemic and Parks. Lessons COVID-19 reinforced about the value of public spaces and outdoor recreation is hosted by Huron-Clinton Metroparks. Please welcome Director for Huron-Clinton Metroparks, Amy McMillan.
It's always great when you bring some of your best friends to your first Mackinac Policy Conference session. Thank you all so very much. My name is Amy McMillan, and I am the director of the Huron-Clinton Metroparks. We are so excited to be here today. I first attended the Mackinac Policy Conference in 2019. And I only did so with the support and encouragement of my board. And one of my board members who was the most supportive and encouraged me to come to the conference is Bernard Parker, who is with us today. So I have to tell you, I was not sure what to expect when I came to the Mackinac Policy Conference. I was more than a little bit worried that I would find myself sitting on that big, iconic porch all by myself, while everyone else was shaking hands and catching up like they've known each other for years. This was not at all what happened. My fears were totally unfounded. The connections were many and they were meaningful. The energy was palpable. The ideas to address challenges and opportunities were real and they were actionable. The commitment to the region and the state and to working together was inspirational to me. After that first day, I knew that the conference was an important stage to relaunch and share the Metroparks brand, and to share the tangible dollars and cents value of investing in public parks and spaces. I began imagining that 2020 presentation even before I got on the ferry to go home. 2020, of course, reminded us that life can be unpredictable. But among the silver linings of such a darkly cloudy year, 2020 also reminded millions of Michiganders of the values of public parks and public spaces. Parks of all shapes and sizes and in all places. They represented the one true place and the chance to safely and socially distantly connect with nature and to reconnect to each other. With people flocking to our parks in unprecedented numbers, the relaunch of the Metroparks brand has in many ways taken care of itself. But the true value of public parks is a lesson that must outlast the pandemic to ensure that these resources and the significant value that they bring to us intrinsically and economically lasts for generations to come. Whether locally, regionally, or across our great state, parks are an important part of our experience in daily life. And that's why we're here today. And it's why I am so excited by being joined by my esteemed and committed colleagues, Alicia Bradford, the director of the Wayne County Parks, Dan Eichinger, director of the Department of Natural Resources, and along with the extraordinary Vickie Thompson. We want to spark a conversation and share what we have learned over the course of our careers, particularly the last 18 months of COVID-19, and how investments in public parks can and do generate wide-ranging economic, health, and environmental benefits. They bolster our communities and they improve our quality of life in so many ways. So thank you to those of you who are joining us in person and those of you who are joining us virtually today. We look forward to this conversation.
Joining Amy McMillan on stage, please welcome Parks Director, Office of the Wayne County Executive, Alicia Bradford. Joining Alicia Bradford on stage, please welcome Director of the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, Dan Eichinger. And to moderate the discussion, Communications Director for the City of Detroit and Black Business Minute reporter for WWJ Newsradio 950, Vickie Thomas.
Well, hello, good afternoon, good afternoon. It's so great to see so many faces, some familiar, some not so familiar. Welcome back to the island. Welcome back to the Mackinac Policy Conference 2021. We are here. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. So this is a very important discussion because really I believe our parks, our green spaces, our greenways, our river walks, were our saving grace and have been our saving grace during this pandemic. It was a place where we could go where many other things were shut down. And I love the one photo on the screen of the Detroit River Walk, which some of you may know was voted the best river walk in the country. And I know that the attendance along the river walk shot up during the pandemic. So our conversation is about what we are seeing, what we anticipate seeing, overcoming any challenges that the park systems may have. And I'm just curious, like, did any of you on your way up here, did you stop at any park or take advantage of any of the beautiful trails in our state? Anybody? All right, we have a few. I love it. I know a couple of people even rode their bicycles from Detroit all the way to Mackinac City. Now that's a feat, right? I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that during the course of the conference. But let's get started with this conversation. As I said, you know, the parks were our saving grace. So Amy, let's start with you. What have you seen and how have you been able to deal with the increase in attendance in the park system?
Thank you so much. Well, you know, prior to 2020, we were actually experiencing some declines in attendance at the Metroparks that had taken place over a period of many years because there were so many competing interests, including those screens that, you know, so many kids and adults have been glued to. And frankly, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were concerned about whether we'd be able to be open. And so as soon as the news came that the parks could be open, we got into high gear. We, at the Metroparks, we had 3 free days a week at the beginning, which was also tremendously supported by our board. And people just started coming out. And then they kept coming out over the course of the entire year. Our attendance was up 35%.
Wow.
We had a goal of raising that decline by 1%, and so we were up 35% across the board. And you know, every single boat rentals, trail use, golf courses, the rounds of golf just exploded. So it was, you know, seeing people reconnect to public spaces in that way, and really being able to really articulate what they meant to them, right? And talk about how they felt better physically and how they felt better emotionally, and that idea that you could be out and see people and not be as afraid in an outdoor space, right?
Were the Metroparks ready? Were you all ready for that 35% increase?
Oh, I have to tell, we were, I don't know if we were, because I mean, who knew, right? But we have just this really tremendous team of employees who are so committed to the Metroparks, who are so committed to service. And it took us a minute, I will say that. One of the things early on, we talked about when we were trying to get people to socially distant. And I know Alicia and Dan and I had did a letter to an op-ed early on because we couldn't get the people on the disc golf courses to stay away from each other. And so we said, all right, dudes, we're shutting down disc golf for a couple of weeks. And that got the message out. And as soon as we reopened, people were like, hey, not only do we want to be out, but we're going to be safe when we're out in places. We're going to take care of them. We're not going to leave trash. I know that was a challenge. We're going to be really respectful of these environments and help you take care of them. And that has just been a tremendously valuable process. I mean, you just can't imagine some of the comments that we get from people and from families. The memories that they're creating in our parks and our public spaces are phenomenal.
And Alicia, tell us about the impact that the pandemic had on parks in Wayne County.
Well, similar to Amy, and definitely I think when Dan will speak, we had moderate attendance at Wayne County Parks, definitely our Hines Park, which we focus on, and our other ancillary locations. We had a moderate number of attendance, but again, once everything opened back up to allow individuals to go into the park system, we saw probably similar 25 to 30% increase just of daily use. Seeing people bike, run, walk along Hines Park out with their families, able to enjoy on a daily basis. So, we saw the same thing, but we had the challenges just the same with just being able to keep up with the amount of individuals that were coming out to the park. Is on a daily basis again. It's a moderate number, but I think that probably tripled on a daily basis throughout the week because people were staying at home, they were working remotely, so they were able to move their offices out to the park. And so we saw that uptick in attendance during that time as well. So I mean, again, we worked with the ebb and flow, as Amy attests to. We talked about, similar situations and how we were going to kind of govern individuals of using those amenities that were still available. We had basketball courts closed, we had bike parks closed just because of the contact and being able to keep socially distanced. So, able to do that and also able to encourage people to enjoy the green space as it was there for them to have available to them. But we had the same type of challenges, but our maintenance staff and our parks team did some things, some innovative things to come outdoors and do more programming to be more engaged, but also to make sure we're doing socially distanced. So we were prepared, but we just had to make some adjustments, I think, just the same as Amy spoke about as well.
And Dan, what about you?
Very similar experiences, although, when the pandemic really set in the state of Michigan in March of 2020, that's not a time of the year when we're anticipating a lot of park attendance.
Right.
And we were pretty quickly overwhelmed. I mean, that's a period of time before we really onboard our seasonal employees. We had relatively few folks that were working in our parks, but we were seeing levels of attendance in our day use areas that would be equivalent to what we would see typically like in May or in June. So it was a real challenge for us, particularly in the early days of the pandemic, of trying to, kind of find that sweet spot with our staffing levels and being able to do sort of the crowd management and the visitation management that were necessary for us. But then throughout the year, we continue to see that trend continue. On a typical year, we might visit or have 26, 27 million people come through the front gate and visit us at one of our 103 state parks. And in 2020, we had 36 million people come through the front gate and visit us at one of our state parks. So we saw a tremendous increase in visitation. And in addition to our day use areas, we've seen that trend continue in our campgrounds as well. And so we have a lot of campgrounds at a lot of our state parks, and we have seen weekend level attendance on a weekday and holiday weekend attendance on your average weekend. And that's a phenomenon that didn't just stop in 2020. That trend has certainly continued into 2021 for us as well. And one of the benchmarks that we use for attendance in our parks are the number of camp nights that we sell during a given year. And usually we'll sell our millionth camp night sometime in October. And we hit our millionth camp night in the second week of August in 2021. So
wow.
Folks are not just, I think there's something that's, for those of us who work in the outdoor recreation field, there's something that's kind of exciting that's happening, this phenomenon that's happening where folks are reconnecting in a way with these natural experiences, these outdoor experiences. And we're so fortunate to be in a state that's so blessed with not just tremendous state park resources, but county parks and other park and recreation authorities that are there to provide them.
And Alicia, talk about the fact that I believe the park system never really fully closed. Aspects of the parks were closed at certain periods. If that's the case, what do you think accounts for that? I mean, I would think maybe some serious lobbying going on.
Well, I mean, right, you're correct, Vicki. It didn't never fully close, but we had specific amenities that closed during that because of the social distancing, just restrictions. But because we did not do any picnic reservations, shelter reservations for 2020. At that time, there were restrictions on how many could gather, even outdoors. So we did not do any reservations, but individuals still utilize those shelters to do that. Again, trying to govern on our bike paths, on our canoe and kayaking, when you were able to utilize your waterways with your family in order to get out and boat and things of that nature. So it was again adjustment, and where it did not fully restrict all of the activity, but it did cause some areas where we did have to pay more attention to in order to manage and govern those specific areas. But we were, again, ecstatic, as Dan and Amy both talked about, just about the importance that people understood of the green spaces and nominal to free activity that they could partake of safely with their family, safely outdoors, and again, in order to stay healthy and fit. But we had to make those specific adjustments in order to keep up with just the momentum of everything.
And Dan, were you ever concerned at any point that the park system would be completely shut down?
That was never really a topic that got any serious discussion with us. In fact, one of the earliest conversations that I'd had with then Director Gordon of the Department of Health and Human Services, and he reached out to me and said, "Listen, whatever you do, I hope you're not thinking about closing down state parks." And the thought had never really entered into my mind. But right from the get-go, from the earliest days of the pandemic, I think the fact that public outdoor spaces were a place that people could safely go, folks needed the opportunity to just kind of feel some release and some mental relief from everything that we were all trying to process at that time. And so again, as what we're talking about here really elevated, I think, and underscored the importance and the value that public outdoor recreation spaces have for us, and the benefits that we derive are not just they're not just fun places to go, but they're really central to securing and sustaining our mental health, our physical health, as we've talked about, and really I think represents the character of who the state is and who the state wants to be.
Amy, same question.
Thanks. So one of the things that I think that, we all had this feeling, and sometimes people take public parks for granted. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things that we learned during the pandemic is that you have to be really intentional in the investments that you're making in public parks, so that they are there for people and so that people can continue to enjoy them. And then one of the things that we heard a lot from local businesses in the 5 counties where the Metroparks are located was how business was booming because the parks were booming, right? So bicycle shops were sold out. They had people on wait lists. You couldn't buy a kayak for miles and miles around, and that idea of just that rediscovery and reconnecting, and the fact that yes, we individually feel better when we're outside, but some of the slides that you see up on the screen, prior to the pandemic, the Metroparks commissioned a study by the Trust for Public Land to really drill down into those economic benefits of public parks, and specifically the Metroparks. And at that time, and this was pre-pandemic, keeping in mind that our attendance was a lot lower then, the research showed that the average person who was under 65 years old, who was spending time in public parks, specifically the Metroparks on a regular basis, was saving like $2,500 a year in health insurance costs. Wow. People older than that, people over 65 were at $2,500. People younger were about half that. But if you look at that not just in your own personal budget, but in everybody's agency's budget, in your business budget, those kind of savings just really continue to underscore the value of public parks throughout the economy, in addition to the public park systems and the local units in which they're located, because it is this big virtuous cycle of economic benefits.
All right, and just for our audience, we'll be taking your questions at the end of our discussion, so get those questions ready. And if you're social and you take some photos or you want to do a post on social media, please use the hashtag MPC21 so we can find your post easily. Next question, Dan, and you mentioned it a bit, staffing. a lot of businesses, business owners in this room, and others are having a hard time finding workers. What's it been like for you?
We are also in the tourism business, so it's been a very difficult year for us. Finding folks who want to work. Some of the examples that I've used with just in my hometown, if you drive down, I live just outside of Mount Pleasant. If you drive down Mission Street, Subway will pay somebody $15-16 an hour to make sandwiches in the air conditioning, and I'll pay someone $11 an hour to clean toilets in a state park.
Which one would you choose?
Well, it was a real conundrum for us, and I know that was an experience that every employer across the state was having to contend with this last year. So staffing certainly is kind of an ongoing challenge for us in the state park system, and then with the increased attendance and the increased uses at our state parks, it's underscored the fact that we celebrated the 100th birthday of the Michigan State Park System here about 2 years ago. And there are a lot of facilities that were, brand spanking new in the 1950s and the 1960s, and we're still kind of coasting on the fumes of those investments that we made at that time. So there's a lot of work for us to do, I think, in trying to build up a contemporary system that is relatively easy for us to manage, that the facilities are in good condition, where it's relatively easy for us to recruit and retain employees. Those are all challenges that we have to contend with every single year when you run a system as big as we do, 103 state parks and recreation areas across all corners of the state. It's not uncomplicated.
Amy, same question.
We had some challenges in hiring this summer, but we've had traditionally some challenges in specific areas of hiring. We operate several pools and aquatic facilities. And so one of the big things that we've been working on with our partners is getting more people interested in swimming, and more kids. We want kids to be safe when they swim in lakes and in pools, but we also want to grow our own lifeguard pool of bad pun, sorry about that. So that's always one of our biggest challenges, getting enough people to work in our pools to keep them open so that we can have, we started swim lessons this summer. Some of them were at Lake St. Clair Metroparks, some of them were in partnership with the City of Detroit Parks and Recreation Department. We're working together on a regional swim survey that's going to look at gaps in programming, so we can fill those gaps throughout the 5-county region. So if anybody out there is a swimmer, or you have kids who are looking for a summer job, we would be happy to have them anytime at the Metroparks. But lifeguards have been our biggest challenge. We've got a really good seasonal workforce that tends to return year after year. And I totally get first of all, everybody has an economic reality, right? So sometimes if you'd rather be outdoors, you've got to be inside making sandwiches at Subway. But my first job in Parks and Recreation was actually picking up trash and putting it back into the landfill in my hometown. So I have cleaned those toilets and painted those garbage cans. And even though it's not the most glamorous of summer jobs, it's one of those ways that you learn how systems work. You learn who's the most important person in any system. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's the person who cleans the bathroom and picks up the garbage. And so there is a lot of value and meaning in that.
Yeah, I think they're underappreciated too, right?
Absolutely.
And Alicia, any challenges in Wayne County park system when it came to staffing?
Same, echoing the same as my colleagues. I mean, just the challenge we had, one specific area, typically in our maintenance, that we've had, struggles with recruiting and retaining, just of compensation. And when you're dealing with, as you said, signing bonuses of $500, at Burger King to sign on, we can't recruit if we're paying, $10.57 an hour for a park maintenance employee or a laborer to come out and help clean our restrooms or pick up trash or weed whip and things of that nature. So that's always been the challenge for us. But our maintenance team that we do have always risen to the occasion. I'm sure like many of our colleagues can talk about, because they have that passion, because they are committed to making sure they present the best green space for those users that come to the parks. But we definitely would have to look at, what we can do to bring some, equality or, kind of balance it the best we possibly can, and know we're a government and know that our funding is restricted because it's based on property value use millage monies as well, and how our general fund balances out the collection of those. But to really figure out how we can do that to kind of alleviate as many challenges. Thankfully, but unfortunately, we did not have our water park open this year because we would have had the challenge of lifeguards. Amy and I talked early on if we were going to do that, and just the recruitment of those as well. The same challenge with just the disparity in rates and trying to recruit. And as you said, many businesses are having the same impact that we are, and we're still having that same challenge. So our steady 25 maintenance and our managers and foremen are making sure they're keeping nearly 4,700 acres. We're 5,600, but 4,700 that we're definitely maintaining. They're keeping those pristine, our comfort stations and everything else that we're offering, sanitizing playscapes and inspecting those. So we'll roll with it and we'll figure out what we need to do, but we definitely would not be able to do it without that staff. They're the important people, as Amy said.
Have you all done anything creatively to address that issue that you could share, and will it come down to increasing user fees or fees for services?
Well, one of the things that we've worked on, and this is something we've worked on, because the challenges that we've had with recruitment, and particularly for our seasonal employees, isn't new. It was just exacerbated this year, in particular with how competitive the job marketplace was. But we've worked with, frankly, the folks in the legislature have been helpful and supportive in trying to allow us to have different rates of pay based on geography or that kind of thing, to try and help us be a little bit more competitive in the job market. There are some job markets where we can't pay competitively. There are some where we're kind of right in line and right in market. But it's taken that kind of work and that kind of massaging to be able to, acknowledge and account for some of those regional differences. And when you have challenges in recruiting employees like we've talked about against a backdrop with the level of attendance that we've seen, it really just kind of highlights that difference, and it puts that strain. And as Amy and Alicia have talked about, how much we have depended on the folks that did show up and our folks who provide the backbone of our system, because we asked them to do an awful lot under some very challenging circumstances, with fewer staff, fewer hands on board.
We were, this year, one of the things that we did was for our seasonal employees, we've always had an hourly bonus at the end of the summer, and our board approved a pretty generous increase to that hourly bonus because we didn't want to just sign people and have them leave, right? So we're talking about signs. There's a store not far from where I live that says $500 for 500 hours. And we didn't want people to just come and go, right? Come in and out. So we think the hourly bonus that we paid at the end of the summer was helpful, and it gives us the flexibility of kind of going back and forth with that. And we're having a big conversation at our board and leadership level right now about what should our minimum level of pay be in the Metroparks. It's part of that national discussion about a $15 minimum wage, and where do we fall on that, and how can we support that, and where does that work? All of our full-time employees make more than that per hour. Our part-time people, some of our part-time people don't, and then some of our seasonal folks fall below that as well. So it's a really big conversation to have, and I expect it will be an ongoing conversation for a while until we find exactly the right balance.
Right, and our county executive, Mr. Evans, has definitely he's been cognizant of that, and so definitely they've focused on now with working with our central HR of doing a study, but also again looking at those particular salaries that are below the margin from the minimum wage, and so looking at bringing that up to parity. So hopefully in those areas that we've had challenges, which I mentioned, the laborers, we'll be able to recruit, we'll be able to retain some of those. There's still some areas that we still need to address across the board of doing some particular salary increases, but I know that when you have a county exec that gets it and is given really the go forth to say, look at this, look how we can implement and do some increases, because we need to, again, show our employees, our teams, that we value them. It also keep those good employees that we have. And then what we do, we just try to motivate. I know me and my assistant director, we try to motivate, treat our team as much as I know my colleagues do, with respect. You know, incentivize what we can, sometimes out of our own pocket, to show that we appreciate them. But again, it needs to be done on a holistic view of trying to make sure that we are paying individuals what closest to what they deserve in order to keep that talent and to keep those individuals working on behalf of the county.
And when it comes to the parks and to the trails and campgrounds and what have you, how well did they hold up with this surge in usage? And we'll start with you on that one, Amy.
We are really lucky. We're one of the things that the Metroparks has been able to do over the course of a period of time has been to make some really good investments in infrastructure. So each year we're able to put aside a certain amount of money in capital improvements. We do focus on those areas that most people use. So in the last couple of years, 2 years ago, we did raise our annual permit fee to $40, and that $5 extra a year has generated enough money that we're spending over $1.5 million every year on trails to keep those facilities in really great condition. This year, we continue to focus on trails and also on accessibility, so that more and more people can use the parks and experience them in the same way that everybody else does, whether you have a special need or not. So some of that has been really just tremendously great planning on the part of the people that came before me, and then also on the part of our board and making those investments every single year, because it's not easy to do, right? You want to build up a certain amount of cushion in a savings account, so if disaster strikes, you've got some money there to deal with it, and it's always this kind of push and pull. So we feel like we're doing a pretty good job, but sooner or later our infrastructure needs are going to catch up with us in the same way the state parks have with theirs. We just keep chipping away at it, one trail mile at a time, one playground at a time, one pavilion at a time.
Mm-hmm. Alicia?
Yep, the same thing. I mean, we've had infrastructure that, needs, major investment at this point in time. Thankfully, we have, fund balance available that we're planning with our design team, of course, with some of the initiatives that the county exec wants us to put forth. But we spend annually $1.4 million on capital projects just for Wayne County Parks. The other portion of the funding goes to our respective commissioners to allocate funding to those particular cities that they are commissioners over. So a total of about $3 million goes into park infrastructure, but just $1.4 million to Wayne County Parks. So we're looking at upgrading comfort stations, playgrounds, trails. We do a lot of our trail maintenance with partnerships and volunteers who help us maintain those. Putting in key connectors, funding going towards that, tapping into grants. That we have been privileged to receive, transportation alternative TAP grants that we've received from MDOT in order to put connections to connect the community safely down to Hines Park. And then we have a plan as well through our strategic master plan and our 5-year recreation plan that we use to kind of guide us on what infrastructure improvements we need to put in place. But it's a lot of things that was new 30, 40 years ago that we need to bring up to date and then have the team to be able to maintain those moving forward. But I think in the last several years, we've done a great job and a lot of improvements that we've done in Hines Park, thanks to the county exec and our department director, Beverly Watson, then definitely our parks team, who just gets behind the initiatives and gets it done.
And then state DNR, how did the parks hold up?
It was very well. I mean, but I have to say, historically, the funds that folks pay for when they stay with us at one of our campgrounds or with your recreation passport, that money really goes towards our operations of the parks. And we have underinvested and underfunded our capital needs and our infrastructure investment for decades. It's really not a new phenomenon, but this level of intense use is really starting to underscore how important it is for us to invest back into that system. When actually I was interviewing for this job, the governor asked me, one of the things in the transition report was this $264 million capital backlog that we have in the state park system. And first question she asked me was, well, what are you going to do about that? Well, this is not what I would have come up with. This wasn't the rabbit I was going to pull out of my hat. But even, you know, from the earliest days of the administration was a recognition of the fact that parks really drive local communities, they drive small business, they incubate economic activity. And when our parks need to be places that are ready to welcome visitors, that are ready to, you know, receive the kind of visitation that we want, it's going to take some dollars, and it's going to take us kind of filling up a gap of some historic underinvestment that we've had there. You know, as I mentioned kind of, I think at the beginning, that we had 36 million or so people come through the front gate, and there are 365 days in a year, and I'm not very good at math, but that's about 100,000 people evenly distributed every single day at one of our state parks. Now, we know not everybody, you know, evenly distributes on a day, but even with that, you know, that's 100,000 people. That makes us, I think, the 7th largest city in the state of Michigan at any given time on any given day. Mm-hmm. And with that, we've got water and sewer infrastructure, electrical, waste and sanitary services. We've got trash removal, public safety, thousands of miles of roads. I mean, we've got all the kinds of infrastructure that a fairly large-sized city has to deal with. Ours is just distributed all over the state of Michigan, and it's time for us to invest back into it. And that's really why the governor, I think, is focused on investing $250 million of the ARP money back into our state park system, and then also made the announcement of $150 million for our local recreation partners so that they can make those same kinds of investments back into theirs.
And those grants are really critical. In the last 3 years, we've been able to just secure about $5 million in grants for capital improvements in the Metroparks from some of those grant sources that come through the DNR, through the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund, and through the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and others, the Recreation Passport Fund. And we're super excited about the $150 million that is part of that ARP money that's going to be designated in grant programs for local parks. It's a competitive program, so it's you know, you've got to have a good project to get funded, right? And it's an objective program so that those grant applications are scored in a way that assures that everybody is on an equal playing field. And I think that's one of the really sort of the unsung activities that the DNR provides to local unit, that kind of partnership. And these are conversations that go on. Alicia mentioned their 5-year plan. We all have to have a 5-year plan to be eligible for those funds. And that is, you know, it's really focused on making those things happen, those priorities. There's a requirement to reach out to every community within your 5-year plan and see what local priorities are. So it's not, you know, me or Alicia or Dan sitting in our office going, wouldn't it be super cool if we did that? Right. We think we're good listeners anyway, but it requires us to listen as well.
Yeah, we did that too in the city of Detroit with the ARPA meetings to come up with how that money should be spent, and a nice chunk of it will be going to parks and recreation. So I think the pandemic has shown us that, you know, these are wise investments, right?
Yeah, and you're in the process of updating your 5-year plan too, and that community outreach, you guys do such a great job with that, and you can see that every time a new neighborhood park reopens, and what that means to people.
All right. In terms of innovation, what can we anticipate?
Let's see.
Let's go.
Well, you know, what's really, I thought was kind of humorous, that we asked people to come out to the parks to enjoy themselves. And I mentioned earlier that people were working, you know, sometimes remotely in the parks. So we've, you know, been asked to have Wi-Fi in our parks. You know, come to the park. We want you to detach.
I never even thought about that.
We want you to detach, but you know, we may have to move along and, you know, put some Wi-Fi in parks. So people, you know, as long as they're coming out to the park, you know, and they want to, you know, do some level of release, we might have to, you know, upgrade that technology to have Wi-Fi available in certain aspects of the park. You know, we've been tapped on to look at putting electric vehicle charging stations, you know, not directly, you know, a revenue generation, but just to have that accessible to the users that come to our parks. And then just really open up and engaging our waterways and promoting those even more. We're responsible for the maintenance of the Rouge River. Our team has been removing log jams to make it more navigable. 87 miles of the Rouge River, just to have access through that venue. So, you know, putting in more kayak and canoeing launches, engaging in additional partnerships, Huron-Clinton and DNR, on what we can do on collaborative programming and activity. So, you know, there's a lot of different things that may not be innovative as we see, but really definitely will enhance just the quality of life and just the experience in our parks.
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, we're, you know, all the things I think that Alicia kind of keyed on, we're trying to do those same kinds of things as well. We're also trying to, you know, change our business model a little bit too. So we've got projects that are underway where we're trying to convert more of our state park facilities over to renewable energy that's produced on site, lowers costs, and helps to demonstrate that renewable technology is scalable and kind of locatable wherever you happen to be in the state of Michigan. And then we're always trying to stay in front of the change curve on outdoor recreation. I mean, folks, the preferences for activities, that's a really kind of dynamic space and dynamic environment. You guys have probably heard me tell this story a bunch of times, but you know, 5 years ago, nobody ever heard of fat tire biking before, and you know, cross country skiing was like, you know, way up at the top of preferred, you know, winter activities. Well, fat tire biking now is well overtaking cross-country skiing in popularity as a winter sport. Well, there's a little bit different trail system that you have to provide in order to attract those users who want to come to a place like Michigan and ride their bike. So we're always trying to kind of stay in front of that change curve and sort of look over the horizon as to what, you know, where are the trends in outdoor recreation going, and then how do we plan facilities and amenities that will meet them so that folks choose Michigan when they're making a plan for a trip based on outdoor recreation.
Well, that one went right by me, Dan. I heard of the fat tire biking.
I hadn't either until, you know, 5 years ago. So.
And Amy?
One of the things we've been concentrating on at the Metroparks in the last couple of years, and you can see from the Trust for Public Land study, is gathering data and using data really well. So we can see where there are gaps in our service, because everybody should benefit equally from parks and from the Metroparks. So being able to use that zip code data that we collect has been really important to us in making good business decisions, making good service decisions, and really drilling down into some of our issues in serving diverse and equitable groups of folks where we've had big gaps historically over the entire history of the Metroparks. And also, it's collecting that data and telling the story, right? So that people will come and they will listen and they will understand that great public spaces don't just happen, right? They have to be provided for in budgets. They have to be supported by tax dollars. And these investments have to be made year after year after year. And some of the data that we've collected has been, at the end of the summer, for example, we had this great partnership with DTE. They called us up and said, hey, we'd like to do something for the community. Could we do some free weekends in the Metro? And we said, yeah, you can. But part of the reason that we could do that is the day that program was over, we could provide them with the zip code of every single person who came in to the Metroparks, who got one of those daily permits, so that they could see that they were serving their service area and they were meeting their business goals and being, you know, partners with the public sector. So making that decision, being able to talk about how parks manage stormwater as part of you know, climate change is such a huge issue, because who thinks about that, right? You think about playing t-ball, or you think about camping, or running on a trail, or walking in the woods. But all of those things that parks do, as you know, in and of themselves, whether we look at them as small or big cities, are really vital information to get into people's hands so that they can support public spaces. They can make great decisions on funding, on supporting funding initiatives, like with the recent changes to the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund in the Constitution. The people of the state of Michigan made that happen, so more grant dollars are available.
All right, before we turn it to audience questions, I'm going to do my last question, but we do have Jim and someone else helping out with questions, so if you have one when the time comes, raise your hand. But my last question is, how about the park users? Some of the people that are looking at you right now, have they been on their best behavior? or have we seen some not so nice park users?
I'll start if you want. So the Metro,
And what's your message to park goers?
So I will say to you that like 99.9% of people who come to a public park, whether it's a Metro Park, a Wayne County Park, a state park, are coming because they want to have fun, they want to get away, and they behave themselves like model citizens, right? They're great people. Every once in a while, it's no different than, at the dinner table. You have an argument with your family, but park users have been on really great behavior, getting the word out about picking up after yourselves when you're in the parks. People have responded to that really well. I mentioned the disc golf courses when we said, you cannot play on our courses if you won't socially distance. They're like, all right, because it's important to me. So seriously, the public has been great. I have zero complaints.
Alicia.
And I echo Amy. The majority of our park users have, appreciated the parks. They do their part in making sure that they can keep them clean, respecting, those spaces. But we do have a few bad apples, and particularly when we're putting in these investments, to make your experience better, please don't, etch your name into our, engineered wood fiber for our, connector.
Don't tag the property, right?
Or burn your grill under our picnic pavilion. So we do have a few of those who may step outside of appreciating the space, but very rarely. Overall, we have individuals that, again, just go to have fun, enjoy the space, do what they can in their part to keep it clean and presentable for the next user.
Dan.
I think at the Department of Natural Resources, we view ourselves as trustees. We are, the ones who have the privilege of being sort of the managers of these places and that are held in trust for the benefit of the people of the state of Michigan. And we take that responsibility very seriously, and our visitors do too. I mean, I think everybody sort of viscerally understands when you walk into a park, you walk into a natural area or part of the state forest system or on a trail, you instinctively understand that this is something that all of us own, and we all own an equal share of it just by virtue of our citizenship in this state. And Michiganders, time and time again, as Amy was alluding to, generation after generation have reaffirmed that these are places that are important to them. And we know that so long as the people of Michigan come out and see us in our parks and in our public spaces, they're going to be well taken care of.
All right, and with that, we'll go to audience questions. Anyone? All right, we've got Shahida. Oh, we'll go to the gentleman over here first, and then Shahida.
Yeah. Oh, okay, you're gonna hold it. Okay, I know you have a common problem with everybody on shortage of the labor and the disparity with the pay. That it's almost national. But I'd like to hear from you how the law enforcement working with you and responding to the park when it's needed, or how it's been patrolled to show the public their law enforcement for the certain group of people to behave well, how you and the law enforcement working together.
That's a good question.
So the Metroparks have a police department within the Metroparks, and we have for decades. And most of our police officers do what they're community policing officers, right? So they have a strong community policing model where they are available and accessible to people. And I think that goes a really long way, because if you come into a park and you feel respected rather than suspected, your entire experience is going to be different with that. One of the things that we've been concentrating on with our police department over the course of the last few years is really focusing in on training on issues of diversity and equity in the Metroparks so that we can provide better service to the people who come into the Metroparks. We have great relationships with local law enforcement as well. Sometimes we have to call local law enforcement for backup on if we're really busy, they'll help us with traffic. Or if we have an accident in a park that they respond to. So we're in a really privileged position within the Metroparks that our police officers our Metroparks police officers. They don't have to divide their attention into many other things, and that has worked really tremendously well for us.
And Commissioner, thank you for your question, because as you know, Wayne County Parks, our Wayne County sheriffs work within our park system. And so we have an office along Hines Park that we have at least 3 to 5 sheriffs that patrol all of our Hines Park areas. So they have an outreach of support to those other municipal areas that we may have parks within Redford Township or City of Inkster or within Trenton as well. But our Wayne County sheriffs in the park system do more of education. There is some level of enforcement, as Hines is along a linear park, so people may exceed the speed limit at times going down Hines, so of course they issue those respective tickets, but they do particular education and the use of amenities, gatherings, things of that nature, and then citations, I think, as the last resort. But they respond well whenever there's a need, and also, again, just general patrol of our spaces for events and activities as well. So we have a good relationship with them. But again, they may have to respond if there are particular shortages somewhere else off of Hines Park. And so there are times that there may not be a level of enforcement at a particular period, but that is not the norm on a daily basis.
Dan?
Well, for law enforcement in our parks, we have our commissioned Parks and Recreation Rangers and non-commissioned Parks and Recreation Rangers who are, primarily what their job is to make sure that, everyone's there is safe, they're having a good time, and that kind of thing. And they have the ability to undertake enforcement of regulations if need be. And then, our conservation officers, we have 262 sworn conservation officers in our law enforcement department. They provide support to our parks as well. And then we have great relationships with our, county sheriffs and other local law enforcement, as well as MSP, that help us out from time to time in the parks. But the big thing is that we're in the hospitality business. Our job is to make sure that folks are there, they're having a good time. As Alicia was saying, that if you've got questions about the amenities, that we want to try and provide a good, positive visitor experience for everybody who comes through that front gate. And that perspective and that value, our folks in our Parks and Recreation Division, all the way through our law enforcement division, I think they really try and express that value that, our job here is really to provide, hospitality and safety and that kind of thing. And that's how they really view their mission. And I think that really shows in how they conduct themselves.
And I know there were some issues initially when the DNR took over the Belle Isle, but it seems like those have pretty much smoothed out. What accounts for that? I don't know if Chief Craig would agree with me on that one, but
well, Belle Isle, as you well know, it is a magical. That is just a magical place.
It really is. It's a jewel.
It was, that we took over the management responsibility for Belle Isle before I got into this role. But again, that's just a really, I think, good example of, trying to get the cadence right with law enforcement through a lot of honest conversations with, our community leaders, with our visitors, responding to what, families and residents are telling us for what they want to see from our staff and from our law enforcement folks that are out there. And I think by and large we've kind of gotten it right, just like we do with every one of our parks, all the way from the west end of the UP down to, down in Monroe, Sterling State Park. There are issues that come up from time to time everywhere, and that's just because wherever humans gather, things from time to time happens. But, by and large, our parks are just fantastic places to be, and they're wonderful places for families and anyone else who wants to get outdoors.
All right, great. Next question.
I'm Shahida Mausi from the Aretha Franklin Amphitheater, which is a City of Detroit facility. My question is, now that we have all endured such short staffing, do you envision that those staffing levels will ever actually go back to what they once were? We have come through it, not necessarily with flying colors, but we've come through it for the most part. And we've seen dramatic increases in usage, right, that we probably all hope will continue. how should we look at the future in terms of staffing levels? I mean, we know we have to pay people, but where's the balance going to strike, in your opinion?
Honestly, I don't think it'll ever. I won't say ever, but it's going to take a minute to really bounce back, I think, to recoup. Even with the increases in salaries, looking at compensation, there's always someone that's going to pay better. It's always going to be someone that has additional benefit than we have. I think it will regain, but I think it probably will take a few years in order to bounce back. And, you know, those agencies, and I know you as a business owner, trying to recruit and think of some innovative ways or thinking incentivizing to try to attract and retain those individuals. But I think, again, we saw the challenges across the board, not only in government, with, you know, small businesses, with corporations to some regard as well. And so I think it's going to take a minute to rebound the same as economically, hopefully within the next couple of years. But I think, you know, we'll be making strides in the right direction in order to get back to the level, hopefully exceed the level moving forward. But we're just going to have to, again, what we're doing now, think on our feet, adjust and plan, you know, the best that we, you know, possibly can in order to make sure that we're still providing a level of service, or maybe readjusting the services that we're providing in order to maximize in one particular area or so.
Let's take our final question.
Vickie, Dan Wyant, Edward Lowe Foundation. I really appreciate this conversation on the intersection of economic opportunity and inclusion, expansion of conservation and health, and so you can really look at the opportunity for Michigan. And I'm curious, my question is, given the challenges, funding, infrastructure, talent, what's the one thing you'd like to see the state do more of, each one of them?
It's a great question. Dan, you want to give that one a shot?
I assume that was for me. You phrased the question that way. You know, I think that one thing that we need to do, and I think we're recognizing and we're trying to put some work towards it, is that, you know, at least I can speak for our agency and for our Parks and Recreation division, we have not been as present in as many communities as we need to have been. You know, there are lots of wonderful places that we manage that are scattered hither and yon across the state of Michigan. We don't have a lot of park or recreation amenities that we manage that are in close proximity to where most of the people in the state of Michigan live, and that's a problem. Belle Isle Park is that's a good example of, you know, I think how important an urban state park can be, not only for our agency, but you know, for the community writ large. We need to be doing more of that. So I would like to see us be a lot more intentional about being present and active in urban communities with outdoor, you know, providing outdoor recreation services. Flint State Park, Governor announced in July her intention to establish the first state park in the city of Flint. First state park, first state dirt that the department will manage anywhere in Genesee County. I think it was the one county out of 83 where the Department of Natural Resources doesn't own any property. And I think that's really significant. And you know, to me, I think leaning into urban communities and development, working very closely. It doesn't always have to be us that manages it, but helping to lift up our partners that do work in urban parks and urban communities. That's something that we as an agency absolutely have to do more of.
Amy, Alicia, Dan, thank you all for a great session. This is actually the first session to open the conference, and awesome job. Your passion came through. We can tell that you're dedicated to the work, so let's give them one more round of applause. And Amy, I'll turn it over to you for any final thoughts.
I would just, again, like to thank everyone for being here. I hope that when you leave the room today that some of the things that we've talked about really stick with you, and that you can be actively involved and engaged in continuing to support and grow public recreation opportunities throughout the entire state. There are all kinds of organizations, local, state, national, regional, that are doing phenomenal work and really deserve your attention. So thank you for the attention you've paid to us today. We hope that we'll have the opportunity to continue to work with you well into the future. Thank you.
Good job. All righty.
Thank you. Awesome.